Well, hey guys, welcome to Hope Rescue Podcast. This is Kimberly and Tim Scott coming to you from our kitchen table where all of the magic happens. And when I say magic, it's not what you think. It's a lot of breakfast and dinner.
There's a lot of good food here.
A lot of podcast magics happening here. Hey,
absolutely.
And happy fall, y'all. This is the first week of October. And why is that so awesome, Tim?
Because that means you're going to put up Christmas decorations.
Okay, and besides that, October's awesome because...
It's when we met.
Babe,
It's your birthday.
Yeah, it's my birthday.
It's your birthday month.
Not till
it's
the 11th,
month we met.
Yeah, so if you're sending
You were
gifts,
12
you've got
when I met
another
you.
week. It's like my favorite time of year. I've mentioned that probably already several times, but I'm very excited about it.
I got through that one okay.
Yeah,
I didn't know where she was. I didn't know where you were going. I thought I was in trouble.
Sweetie, you
at
would
the
have been
outset.
if you got the wrong answer, especially since we're doing a series on marriage.
By the way, speaking of marriage, we just had a little staycay, which was amazing.
So good in
And
San
should we
Diego.
say where we did it? No.
It's a
no,
local
not too far
resort
away.
because then everybody will know our spot, and then, and then we can't hide out
They'll start
anymore.
going there. Yeah. Anyway, it was a glorious time, and
So let me give some background to that.
Okay.
We had scheduled, this is our second year in a row due to COVID, a anniversary trip. It was to be our 15-year anniversary. 2 years ago, we were taking this trip.
Yeah.
And it's been canceled twice now due to the restrictions, depending on where you're going in the world. So we decided we're just going to take a couple of days because we have stuff going on in October. Not just my birthday, people, but really other things for you, which you're
Yes.
having a shoulder surgery coming up.
Oh, that's
So we
coming.
had to squeeze in a little staycay, and boy, was it great. Sometimes, we've never done that before, but we decided to take like 2 days and just go somewhere, and we had the full spa treatment.
It was glorious.
I'm in heaven.
it was so good.
Yeah, and there were
Good
many
food.
years that we weren't able to do that, and now that we have no kids at home, Mom and Daddy likey.
Yeah. And one of our kids came and watched our
Watch the
house
kids,
and
yeah.
the dogs.
Yeah, yep,
The
there you
kids
go.
are
It's a great way to...
canine kids.
to-
I couldn't come up with the word canine.
Canine
There it
dogs.
is. Dog.
Canine kids.
Canine
So,
kids.
so that's one of the great ways we have just discovered besides road trips to help manage stress and anxiety. And let me segue from that into your book, Breathe, which is how to manage and overcome anxiety, depression, and negative emotions, which I just want to give you a shout out, Tim Scott, Dr. Scott, to you
Thank
and me.
you. Call me Dr. Scott. Thank
That
you.
you have sold hundreds of these books.
We have.
And most recently, even. And so if you haven't gotten yours, go to hoperescue.org and pick up a copy. You'll find them cheapest there, but you can buy them on any platform that sells
Yeah,
books,
Amazon,
basically. Right.
Barnes &
Yeah.
Noble.
Yeah. So today we're
Walmart.
talking about the signs, continuing to talk about the signs in marriage in our series called Strike the Original Match of red flags in your marriage. What are the signs? What are things that let you know that you may be in trouble? And we're going to front load this conversation about some of those signs, but we are also going to, in the next episode or two, also on the back end of the episode, give things tools, practical tools to help you with those potential.
Yeah, so
landmine
the
situations.
idea of strike the original match, we've already explained this, but once again, once you strike a match, obviously that sulfur has already been burned and you can't light it again. It would take a miracle, and that's the point of this. It does take a miracle. Once a marriage hits a really rough spot, that's why we need the Lord. And trying to make your marriage work without the Lord, I think is a huge mistake. It's just so much better with Christ in the middle of your marriage.
Absolutely. Your foundation.
Yeah. I mean, we all bring challenges, baggage, whatever, we're still trying to figure out my baggage and your baggage. I pack pretty heavy. I have a
I got
pretty
some
big
baggage.
backpack, but obviously that takes special intentional actions. So what we thought we'd do is we've been sharing the last few weeks. This will be our third episode on this, talking about the signs that a marriage is in trouble. The first one we want to share today is when threatening takes place, especially threatening to leave. If you're in a marriage where things are tense and you threaten to leave, there's one of two reasons you do that. You actually mean it and you want to leave, or you're trying to manipulate the person to get them to do what you want them to do so that you don't leave. And either way, whether it's manipulation or whether it's genuine, I'm out of here, those aren't helpful. I think you need to fight for marriage. And I think a lot of marriages really struggle with this. I've counseled many people who really were not seriously thinking about divorce or separation, but they threaten to leave all the time. Well, I'm just going to file for divorce,
Right.
or I want a separation. They don't mean it. And if somebody called them on it, they'd be like, wait, what?
Yes. And though I was just thinking as you were saying that, though, we're talking about a generation, several generations that have grown up in broken families.
Right.
So it's a very real possibility
Yeah.
that back doors stay open. And
Yeah.
when you start verbalizing that, especially in the beginning of your relationship, you're setting yourself up for disaster,
So-
because there's a lack of safety in the relationship for the spouse and for you.
That's the problem
Yes.
with it, lack of safety.
Right. And you've already verbalized it. So there is, you are at some point going to start manifesting that, going that direction.
If if you're just listening for the first time to our podcast, or maybe just a few times, our history is both of us are in our second marriage, second and final.
Yeah.
Is that
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Yeah, no threats.
We're
here.
done.
Yeah, we're done. Anyway,
Locked and loaded.
yeah. But our first marriages ended in divorce, and it may be something that you don't want, but it happens. And both of us fought for our marriages to try to keep them in the ways that make us feel better about the fact that we didn't just walk away when times got difficult. And threatening somebody for anything is a huge mistake.
Right.
It's just a sign of real decline in the intimacy of the marriage. What's the
Right.
second one?
Absolutely. Another thing to look for is to be careful and wary of connecting with reckless, toxic friends. Because when you hit a vulnerable spot in your relationship, which we all do, you either intentionally lean into friends that are wise, maybe friends that have been down that road that you can connect with, that can give you wisdom, support. And that I feel like the best friends to go to are the ones that love you both and support you both.
Yeah.
And to get positive and encouraging insight and wisdom, but it's dangerous when you connect with toxic friends who are like, let's just go to a girls' night out, let's go to some bars, let's blow some steam off. I'm not saying that's a bad thing always, but be careful, because those are the friends that can lead you down that path of your exit if you're not careful. And
Yeah.
so
There-
you want to have people who are mature enough to speak into your marriage, and not everyone can.
Yeah, and you need to be careful that some people partying for them and reckless behavior for
Go
them
together.
may
Right.
be, their deal. Well, you don't want to get sucked into that. So
Yeah.
the third one is this: either one or both feels lonely in the marriage. A real sign that there's a problem in the marriage or there's trouble brewing is when you feel lonely in your marriage. It's very easy for people to feel lonely even in a crowd, feel lonely at school, feel lonely at work, feel lonely in marriage. That's a real problem, because that's your go-to person. That is
Should
the
be,
person.
yeah.
Should be. Right, exactly. And this is the person that God has given to you for your life, for better, for worse. I mean, there's not everybody's perfect, but we have our imperfections, but I'll speak for me. My favorite person to be with is Kimberly, and I'm your favorite person, right?
You'll speak for me too.
Yeah, I guess I will speak for
You
I
are
am
my
your
favorite
favorite
person.
person, is how I see
And
it.
I want to say this to that point, is that it is normal in a healthy marriage to have times when you aren't feeling completely connected. And so this is not the same thing. We're talking about a continuous state of loneliness
Yeah,
in
that's
a
a good
marriage, because there are times when a partner withdraws due to work or due to focus on family needs or whatever. That's not what we're talking about here. It's being in a state of disconnection from your spouse.
That's a good thing to put on that, because I think feeling lonely is part of life.
Yeah.
And there are times that you're going to feel lonely. Yeah, and we're talking about ongoing loneliness,
Right.
not just a moment, a week, or even a season. So fair enough. Very good point there. The fourth one is this. Fourth sign that there's trouble is you live in fear of your spouse cheating on you. Now think about that. It could be that it's just you're insecure. And I've dealt with a lot of people who are just basically insecure, and they think their spouse couldn't love them enough to stay with them and be faithful. But it also could be that your spouse is not respectful and maybe is flirtatious, maybe has inappropriate relationships, emotionally connected to people, and so forth. So that could be a problem.
Yeah, and a lot of times, just to balance that too, your insecurity can be based on fact in past relationships where you have been cheated on. So
Yeah.
you tend to project that, or you have been potentially the cheater in your past relationships and you project that on your partner. So you kind of have to analyze that situation. But living in fear of that is a terrible place to be. And you can't be intimate with someone you're fearful of not, again, feeling safe with.
Yeah, I had a car that was a GM product. It was a very nice car, but it was back in the 70s or maybe early 80s. I can't remember. Late 70s, early 80s. It was the 80s. I remember now. And I had a diesel engine. Well, those were converted. So a converted gasoline engine to a diesel engine, General Motors decided to do that. And this was a luxury car, but it kept blowing the head gasket because it couldn't handle the pressure. And so the first time was no big deal. It was a relatively new car, and it only had like 25, 30,000 miles on it. And it blew a head gasket. I'm like, oh, okay. And they fixed it and so forth. And then another 20,000 miles, it blew a head gasket again. It did it 3 times. What happens is you start losing confidence in that car, and it's not reliable. If you've been cheated on, and you've been cheated on repeatedly, and maybe in some cases in every relationship you've been in, you begin to wonder if anybody can be trusted.
Right.
And or maybe you've been the person that has cheated. And listen, God can change others, but God can also change you, and you can be transformed. If you've been a serial cheater, God can, in fact, change that. But it's going to take a lot of work to get somebody to trust you.
Right.
Kind of got away from this sign of trouble, and really the sign is not that somebody's cheating. That's more than a sign of trouble. That's you're on life support.
Yeah.
But what I'm talking about is when you sense that somebody, you can't trust that person. And again, it might be your own insecurity. It might be, like you said, Kimberly, the projection from past experiences.
Yes.
Or it may be that the person is not treating you properly, and you wonder about that. So that would definitely be a sign. That's something that you've got to deal with.
Right. So number 5 would be allowing your parents to overly influence your marriage. And through the years, we've dealt with couples and friends that have had, either one parent or both parents overreaching into their marriage and causing division, causing, wanting to, I think in some way, compensate for their own need of being needed, and so they want to step in and try to spiritually lead your marriage. And our encouragement to parents and to folks is that you are important and you matter. Be there and be available on the sidelines. And when you're not asked, don't offer information or support, but spend your time in prayer and keep proximity.
As parents of adult children that are married, many of our kids are married, and you watch things go and happen. We're pretty good at staying out of their business. There have been times where I've spoken up, which I wish I hadn't, but that's rare. Usually we just pray, and if they want us to give our input, we do, but mostly we just pray. But from the perspective of your marriage, a sign that things are going poorly is when you're living for your parents,
Right. To
not
please
just,
them.
you get. I want to be, and we're going to talk about family of origin here in the last half of this, and we'll talk about how to strike that original match, how to really create the miracle in your marriage, and it's really one thing, but it encompasses several things about this one thing, and that is leave others, including your parents, leave them out of your relationship. It's very important in most marriages, and we teach this to couples that are getting married as well as those who have been married, is that family of origin.
Yeah.
You know, how did your parents behave? Was your father dominant? Was your mother dominant? You know, who did the dishes in the house?
Roles in the home.
Yeah, who was the primary breadwinner? You know, who was the disciplinarian? You know, all of those things. What was the function? Was very hierarchical.
Hierarchical.
Thank you. Or egalitarian, very equal. You know, if there was that structure as you grew up, it's going to affect the way you deal with your spouse and your marriage.
Yeah, and if your models are different, that's going to cause some conflict. We were pretty fortunate. Our parents had very similar rules in the home, but I think that's unique.
Yeah, and similar financial structure,
dynamic of
commitment to the Lord, ministry. Both were pastors. Both your mom and my mom were also teaching pastors, and we had very similar roles. In fact, our fathers are very much like each other, kind of that gruff but also tender.
Yes,
and then our mothers are very similar
strong,
in
but
that
tender,
way.
Yeah,
and so we're very similar. I think our expectations were pretty close. In fact, that's one of the reasons we were drawn to each other. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think for both of us in our first marriages, and some of you have heard our stories in the past, but our marriages broke down due to outside involvement in our marriages that we didn't have control over. But I think we both went into our first marriages expecting to have a similar kind of dynamic, and that did not happen, and not in the healthy ways that we had experienced.
You did, I think, more than me. I really was so young. I didn't know what to expect.
Yeah.
And I probably thought it would be the same as my parents, but that was not really I was just a kid.
Don't you think, though, for couples getting married, it's so important to discuss those things?
Oh,
what
absolutely.
What were your parents' roles? What are your expectations for roles in the home before you even engage, obviously, in a lifelong commitment? But
so we do this thing called a boot camp, and marriage boot camp, where we actually write down what the expectations are in very specific areas: finances, gender roles, sex, all kinds of things that are laid out there, and it gets those couples really talking about it.
Yeah.
So for $1,000, we can take you through that. Okay, $850.
All right, we'll do it free.
So let me read this scripture, and then we'll kind of break this down. And this is used, by the way, 3 important times in Scripture. Moses records this. God said this. Jesus said it in the Gospels, and Paul wrote it in the epistles. In Ephesians 5, it says, "Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother, hold fast to his wife, and they two shall become one flesh." And all of those quote God in creating Adam and Eve. It was important for a man and a woman to leave their parents, that family of origin, and leave that out. So let's first talk about leave.
Leave and cleave.
Leave and cleave. King James says cleave, but we'll change that up. But go ahead.
So
and
the
talk about
leaving is not just I'm moving out of your house and I'm moving in with my husband or whatever. That's obviously like the physical act of leaving, but leaving is more actually an emotional body, soul, and spirit experience. So it's not a one-time event, and it actually has to be kind of repeated every day, because if you grew up very, very close to your parents, that's awesome, by the way. You still need to learn to direct and cleave that intimacy and intentional relationship towards your spouse first.
Yeah.
And it also goes for friends as well, is to try to be intentional to make your person, your spouse, the number one person that you process with, challenges that you want to talk to the most, and really nurture your relationship by doing that.
Yeah.
Because when you're divided in those things, let's say you have a relationship with your mom where you've always talked crap about friends or whatever's going sideways in your life, and she's the one you call your mom before you call anybody else, or you end up calling your mom about your spouse, and making complaints or whatever. Already you set yourself up for a toxic relationship connection. So our encouragement is to be intentional every day to leave those relationships. Maybe the way they looked before should look different in the future. Not that you can't have a close relationship with a parent, but your closest relationship needs to be with your spouse for sure.
Yeah, you talk about other friends. It is, if I said this recently, I don't remember where I first heard this, but if you want to ruin something good,
Yes.
compare it to something else.
That is the truth.
You want to ruin something that God has called you to do, compare it to what somebody else has been called to do. If you want to ruin your marriage, compare your marriage to somebody else's marriage. If they have a lousy one, you'll feel better about yours, but if they have a great one, you're going to feel lousy about yours.
Right.
So don't compare to your parents, don't compare to your friends, and don't compare your husband to somebody else's
Big
husband
mistake.
or your wife to somebody else's wife. It's just a mistake. You just need to live your life before the Lord as the unique oneness that you are in Christ.
The irony is those friends are comparing their spouse to yours.
Yeah.
So of what the version they think they know.
That's why our friends love being around us. They go, wow, I'm so thankful I'm married to Bob. Not Tim.
Said
All right.
Robert. No.
Yeah. So hold fast to the second one. So you not only leave mother and father and friends, applied it to that, but also then it says hold fast to one another. The word is interesting because it's proskuleo, which means, it's the Greek word proskuleo, which means pros means toward. And this idea of kuleo is the idea of glue. So you're actually glued together. So marriage needs to be about not just connecting, but being glued to each other. It's a little sounds a little needy. I'm like, hello, where are you going now? I don't know, wherever you're going, I'm going.
I'll find you on Friend Finder.
Yeah. But when you're glued to your spouse, there's no room for another romance in your life. There's no room for another intimate relationship in your life. When you're glued to your wife or your husband, listen, you've got a place that is irrevocable. And I think it has to be intentional.
Yeah.
And it's not just a one thing. You don't just leave one time. You leave every day. Every day it needs to be intentional. I'm leaving every other relationship out and I'm holding fast to my wife or my husband. That has to be intentional. And you need to be glued to that person so that there's no separation. That does not mean that you don't have independent time. Because if you don't have independent time, you will ruin your marriage. Nobody can handle connection 24/7
of the time.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, and I know we're going to talk about this more in the next episode, but I think the biggest challenge to what you described is not outside influences, it's children. Raising kids in the midst of a marriage, a busy life, a career choice, two parents working, and because you naturally have mommy guilt, daddy guilt, so you expend those energies towards trying to stay connected to your children and the family unit. Which as a mom, I'll just say, I think that's partly how God wired us, is to just always think first of your kids who need you most, right? Because when you're in a partnership with another adult, you're like, well, they're an adult. They've got
They can
this.
handle it.
Right. But that's actually, that's misguided, because it's important that we become one flesh, and that's intentional.
That's the third thing,
Yep, that's intentional. And that is being one, obviously, in intimacy, staying intimate in our connection with each other. That involves mutual respect for one another. And it also involves sharing your dreams and goals and processing everyday conversations about today and the future together. So, but we'll jump more into the parenting side next week.
Think about this. If you want your marriage to be successful, any romantic relationship, but especially marriage, but any romantic relationship is going to take that leaving, holding fast, and becoming one flesh. Now, we believe, as Scripture says, that is for marriage. You become one flesh. I think you mentioned earlier, body, soul, and spirit. It's not just physical intimacy, it's spiritual intimacy, it's emotional intimacy. And so you really need to intentionally, day after day, leave others out, hold fast to each other, and become that oneness that God has meant for you to have. So we're going to talk next week about some other signs, some more signs, and then also we'll finish up again by giving you some of our input about how to really strike that original match and let God do a miracle in your marriage and in your life. God bless. Thanks for listening. And if you want to get a hold of this book, hoperescue.org. hoperescue.org. God bless. We'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.